Hello, you beautiful beings. Welcome back to another episode of Empowered Human with Nina Garcia, the growth oriented podcast that invites you to do the very special thing of transforming from powered to empowered so you can, yes, courageously own your truth without invalidating yourself and without invalidating others. So, if you're new, welcome. And if you're back, you're an oldie but a goodie, and I have got something very special planned for you. This entire month, we're working on intimacy, but today it's about intimacy at work, and I'm not talking about sexual or romantic intimacy. Intimacy is closeness, folks. Yes, if we're going to talk on a human to human level, intimacy is closeness. And so when we're talking about intimacy at work, I want you to think, do I work in an environment in which there is intimacy? Yes, in which I have to work closely with other human beings. So if that is the case for you, welcome, welcome. We are going to help empower you, of course, to feel more confident and more secure with how you human with other human beings. So let's lean in. Let's lean in. Today's episode is going to be special in a very special question, folks. How do I work closely with other human beings who have a different perspective than mine? And I think this is really important because I had a beautiful human being come to me and say, Nina, I am really struggling with everything that's going on in the nation and trickling down into our work situations and our work scenarios and our workplaces. Nina, how do I work with other people who not only have a different perspective than me, but have an invalidating perspective of me? To clarify that for my beautiful audience listeners out there, how do I work closely with people who are okay with putting me down, with making me feel smaller, with misrepresenting me, and in fact, with outright rejecting me? So, without further ado, if this sounds like it is a question that has been percolating for you and you want to know how do I transform from powered to empowered on this issue, intimacy at work, working closely with you and other human beings, then join us. If you're like, okay, I hear this on an individual level, but I'm the one who owns the company. If you want a company culture that celebrates the humanity of the people who work in your business, this episode is for you. Yes. And if you know someone who that applies to, share it with them. Grab a friend or a journal to dialogue with about what is going to come up for you in this episode. Because, of course, at this point, I am so curious. Are you ready to play? Let's go ahead and take a breath on in and exhale that out. Of course, a reminder for the question for today's episode is this: how do I work closely with human beings who have a different perspective than me? How do I create a company culture that has a validating way of exploring and expressing and celebrating the human beings who work within the company? And so, the answer in a nutshell, which I usually give in the intro, but I want to give here today, is this: we're really coming down to how do you transform from powered mindset to an empowered mindset. And for those of you who have a journal, that's powered with a capital P versus empowered with a capital E. Both of these think about the individual, right? The self, relevant to the other and the world at large. Okay. It's about what you can change as an individual, how you affect others in your immediate environment, and then, of course, the world at large. This is bigger systems, folks. And when we're talking about workplace environments, we're definitely talking about systems. Yes. So write that down: a powered versus empowered in a nutshell. We're also, we're going to talk a little bit here today, folks, about the anti-supremacist spectrum that we play with in the empowered human world. If you're unfamiliar with that, you're in for a treat, but I'm going to tell you right now, we really lean into some uncomfortable territory, right? The empowered human world is all about being growth oriented. And that means I have to be willing in some way, shape, or form to say, yes, there are things that are uncomfortable in this world. And you know what? I still want to see if I can move through them, because the only way out of that discomfort is truly through it. It's not going back. You cannot go back. We can only go forward. And so, how do we find comfort in the discomfort just enough so that we can truly move forward into our next growth space? So, in lieu of a story, which I usually tell here, I actually want to invite you into your workplace scenario, into your workplace environments. And I really want you to think about what it is to say that you have an intimate work environment. Who are the people that you are working most closely with? Maybe it's a supervisor. Maybe it's people who are on the same power level as you. Maybe it's with people who are at a quote unquote lower power level. Okay. I want you to start to imagine your work environment and the power dynamics that are already there. That's a lowercase p power dynamics, right? Because power dynamics exist everywhere. It's just the influence that we have on ourselves and each other. But when we're talking about a powered versus empowered environment, I really want you to imagine this for those of you who don't see me, but for you guys on YouTube, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay. Imagine this. I've got two hands in front of my face, my hands in front of my face. Yes, I'm wiggling my fingers. And now I'm going to put them into fists. I'm going to put my right fist up above my head and my left fist down below my chin. And what I'm showing here is that this is a powered dynamic. A capital P powered dynamic says that I, the individual, am okay with minimizing someone else. I'm okay with invalidating them if it means that they will get back on track with what I think is best. So that fist that's above the head, that's a powered individual. They're okay with lowering someone else, with minimizing them, misrepresenting them, or outright even rejecting them if it means that they'll get them back in line to what the person in power believes. Okay, this is a power dynamic. We have this and see this all the time. The key that I want you to take away from this power dynamic is not that it's a mystery or that it's a surprise, really, but that it's a choice. Powered individuals are willing to choose to minimize, misrepresent, or reject another human being if they disagree with them. Now, in some cases, I'm going to tell you it's probably okay for you to have a power dynamic. In some cases, I know that it's necessary for you to have a power dynamic for the safety of yourself, others, and the world at large. But I also know that in most cases, it is unnecessary. In particular, in the world that we live in, for most of us listening to this podcast, a world that has a vast amount of resources and very much has access to them or can get access to them. And so that's a power dynamic. Yes. Now, when we transform to this empower dynamic, right, my left fist moves up and it's now in line with the right one. And what I'm saying here is that this is an empower dynamic. Both of these individuals understand that through their lived experience, they might have different points of view. And it's all based on their lived experience. But they are not willing to choose to invalidate the other individual simply because they have a different experience. An empowered human does not choose to minimize, misrepresent, or outright reject another human being simply because they are different, simply because they have a different lived experience. That is not the empowered human way. It also does not mean that you agree with another individual just because they're different or just because you both believe in the empowered human way. It doesn't mean that you have to agree. It does mean that you are not going to choose to invalidate another human being. We're going to seek to build a bridge. That is what the empowered human does. Anytime there's a difference, we seek to build a bridge of understanding, of greater connection, so that we can both move through the discomfort and figure out how to move forward and into our next growth space. You picking up what I'm putting down? Okay. Mark it down in your journals now. Where are some spaces where you've noticed that power dynamic, a willingness to invalidate, right? This can show up in somebody yelling at you, somebody telling you that you're not enough, that you're not good enough, that the work's not enough or good enough, right? That something must be wrong with you because didn't your mother do this or your father do that? Or don't you know what it is to order this or buy that? Don't you know what this is? All of the moments that come from a powered space are based on an assumption of how someone's lived their life, and it's been different than yours. Empowered humans understand that because we have lived experiences, I may not be able to make assumptions about what you do or do not understand, think, feel, or believe, right? or even how you would behave. I cannot make assumptions like that as an empowered human because the world is simply too diverse. We're too different, right? We're multifaceted individuals. And of course, you guys have heard me say this so many times, there is many ways to human as there are human beings. And so, with that said, now that we've got a clear view of powered individuals who will choose to invalidate if it means getting somebody back in line with what they believe, and empowered individuals who will not choose to invalidate, they really seek to build that bridge of greater understanding with the resources from both individuals to figure out how can we forge a new path forward. There is something really special about understanding we live in a country that has these very particular supremacist ideals. And I want you to get away from any assumption right now of what I mean by supremacist, because I'm going to be very explicit about what we mean by supremacist. For today's episode, a supremacist is an individual who very particularly has an oppressive dynamic. They're willing to oppress other human beings based on their identity, based on how they live, think, feel, breathe, behave in this world, right? And a supremacist individual is willing to do that. They have a lot of bias. It's very explicit bias, and that's judgment, okay? Very explicit judgment. They have very, very particular ways about how the world should be, and they are willing to invalidate and oppress others in order to make that happen. So, that can happen with race or ethnicity or gender or socioeconomic status or region or hair color or eye color. Do you see where I'm going with this? You can actually have a supremacist view based on any human identity facet. And I hope that this is blowing your mind right now because many of us are really only taught about racial supremacy, and it's not the only kind of supremacy that exists. So, without judgment, as we move forward, I really want to invite you to explore this idea that may feel a little uncomfortable. And you know what? If you don't like it, you can throw it away. You can throw it in the waste bin, put it on fire for all I care, right? Metaphorical fire, y'all, just so we clear, okay? Otherwise, if it's something you want to think about, don't throw it in the waste basket just because it's uncomfortable. Put it on the shelf. You don't have to carry it all the time. Put it on the shelf so you can come back and think about it. And if you're like, you know what? I love this, Nina, or I like this, or I'm drawn to this and I really want to run with it, then I invite you to take it and grow with it, explore it, see what comes up for you, right? Of course, in this one episode, I cannot possibly, I cannot possibly cover all the facets of what it is to say that we're looking at a supremacist identity, excuse me, or character, but I want us to explore what that is. And without judgment, I invite you to put yourself somewhere on the spectrum. I invite you to say, hey, actually, this might be somewhat of a level 5 or level 3 or level 2 or level 1 or level 4 supremacist part, right? Even if it's uncomfortable, you can play with it here and you can totally leave it behind after this episode if it doesn't serve you. But if it does, I invite you to take it and put it wherever it needs to go so that you can truly benefit from it, so that you, others, and the world at large can truly benefit from it. So, without further ado, we have an anti supremacist spectrum. We go from 1 to 5, and 5 is the most supremacist, the most oppressive, the most explicitly biased and judgmental you can be. A 1 is the least oppressive, the least supremacist, and actually is the least explicitly biased because it is the most implicitly biased, okay? Explicit bias and judgment is when you are literally saying something that is judgmental. Implicit is an implied story or narrative that affects the way that you see things outside of yourself or even within yourself. Yes. Implicit is implied. It's a story that's sort of hidden. Explicit, out there, loud and proud, usually. There it is. It's being said. Okay. So, without further ado, here we go. 1 through 5, I'm going to actually work backwards from the most oppressive to the least oppressive, okay? A level 5 is an overt supremacist, okay? In our system, it's an overt supremacist. And an overt supremacist are your characters that definitely know, right? These are the human beings that definitely know that they have a judgment against a very particular facet of humanity, and they're not afraid to say it. They're not afraid to teach others about their judgment. In fact, they think that this very particular type of human should be put down and oppressed because then it would make everybody else's life easier. They're okay with invalidating and teach how to invalidate, which in our world, of course, write this down in your journal. And what is invalidation? Minimizing, misrepresenting, or outright rejecting. Okay. Minimizing, looking like I'm going to put you down and tell you things aren't as good. Okay. I'm going to steal your light. I'm going to take away your vibrance. Misrepresenting is I'm going to liken you to an object, an animal, a disease. That's a misrepresentation of someone's humanity. Okay. Do we see how this is dehumanizing folks? How it's invalidating? So it's minimizing, misrepresenting. Outright rejection is not including them, cutting them out. And in some cases, it could mean harming or even worse. Okay. Now, that's an overt supremacist. Okay. Level 5, they know it. They're proud of it. They're not afraid to show it. Okay.
Quick break for a sec. If Empowered Human is offering you something valuable about courage, healing, belonging, or love at your core, you may want to work with me. In particular, if you know of or identify as a high achieving man, and I say this quite seriously because if you don't, I'm going to drive you up a friggin' wall. High achiever that has leveled up in every arena except your relationship with yourself or your relationships with others. Visit empoweredhuman.love for more on how you can level up in your relationships with one of our Empowered Human intensives. Intensives understand the value of your time. Of the 3 that I offer, Walk into Courage covers a month's worth of weekly sessions in just 2 hours. Dive into Courage is a 3-day intensive that can cover up to 6 months worth of sessions. And Ascend into Courage is a year-long program to give you the skills and the network you need to level up for lifelong emotional security. When it comes to leveling up in your relationships, I got you. Head to empoweredhuman.love for more, but for now, back to the episode.
If we dial it back, level 4. Level 4 is our casual supremacist. Casual supremacy, again, these are parts, these are facets of what it is to be a human being, folks. These things can be changed. Okay. You're not born this way. You learn how to be this way. You get lived experiences that end up developing these supremacist parts. So we did level 5. Sorry, now level 4 is your casual supremacist. A casual supremacist parts makes jokes about a particular type of human being. It's at the expense of that human being, whatever the identity is that they don't believe really is worth as much as them, but they're going to make jokes about it. These are the people who make really inappropriate jokes. And they're like, wow, was that funny? Not for everyone, folks. That's your level 4. Let me get a sip of water before we keep going, y'all. I'm just moving right on through this. Mm. Mm. Forgot there was a lemon in this. Okay. Take a breath in. Yes, we'll come back to the episode now. Your level 3s are your covert supremacy, okay? If you have a covert supremacist part, what that looks like is it's not actually likely to say things in public. It's more those moments where something happens, where another human being that you think isn't worth as much as you, or shouldn't really exist in the way that it does, it pops up and you look around for other people to see if they also would judge that negatively. And then you give them the eye, like, you know what I'm talking about? Can you believe this? This, honestly, why do we even have this here? Right? It's not nearly as explicit. It's much more covert. And you're going to look for people who are like that, right? That's that covert supremacist part is it's looking to find other people who judge it, but it's not going to be quite so loud and proud. Okay. That's a 3. Then we dial back to 2. 2 is an unconscious supremacist. These are people who genuinely, they want to do good in the world. They want to challenge the isms and the phobias of the world, and they don't want there to be this judgment. But what ends up happening with an unconscious supremacist is even as they're intending to do good work, when they step in it, right? When they accidentally, unintentionally offend someone else based on their humanity, right? Some facet of their humanity, and it's brought to their attention, the unconscious supremacist at a level 2 becomes defensive. They might become overly guilt ridden and shame ridden. They might burst into tears and say, how could they do this? Okay, that's your level 2 unconscious supremacist. There's a lot piece there that, and this is the real one that I want to start, is they become defensive. Okay, right? I didn't mean it this way. You should know that I'm doing this work, that this matters to me. All of that defensiveness is still that unconscious supremacist part that says, basically, I shouldn't have stepped in this, and you should know that that's not what my intention was. Intent is not the same as impact, right? Which is what brings us to our level 1s of an anti-supremacist. A level 1 anti-supremacist recognizes that at some point we're going to step in it, right? At some point, I am going to say something and it's going to offend somebody else and I'm not going to realize it. But the minute I realize it, instead of getting defensive and I didn't mean that, like, what do you mean? Why are you being so offended by this? You know me, right? Instead of all that defensiveness, I'm going to say, snap, crackle, pop. You are totally right. I see what just happened there. That was not my intention. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. What do you need? One more time, folks. Let me read that back to you. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. That was not my intention. What do you need? That's it. I don't know what it is to be a savior in this moment. I don't know what it is to be defensive in this moment. All I'm going to do is take a breath in, as uncomfortable as it might be. That was, thank you for bringing that to my attention. That was not my intention. What do you need? Okay. So, with that said, I have just gone through very quickly what we play with when we say, like, these are supremacist parts that exist within us, whether we want them to or not. It came from a lived experience. It came from somebody who passed a story down that said you should be able to judge this particular type of human this way. And of course, because we're empowered human, I want to invite you to challenge that. I want to invite you to develop an anti supremacist part or at least head in that direction. I want to invite you to recognize that we are designed based on our lived experience and that you know what? If you gain more lived experiences that help diversify your experience of humanity, it turns out you become more empowered and you develop greater connections and a greater sense of self in the world. So, with that said, I want to get you to your adventure challenges because I gave you a lot of education in this episode, and I want to get you to your adventure challenges. There are three of them, and they work in three levels: self-awareness, self-knowledge, and self-realization. So, for self-awareness today, I wanted to keep it really simple. Am I aware that there is a difference between powered engagement and empowered engagement? That's your question. If you have the answer, go ahead and write that down in your journal. If you're not sure, dial back in the episode. What is the difference between powered engagement, a willingness to invalidate others, and empowered engagement, a willingness to validate that we have lived experiences, right? And to build a bridge. That's the awareness piece. If you're like, I've got that, Nina, what's the self-knowledge? My level twoers, self-knowledge, can you actually define the difference between powered and empowered? Could you do it not just with yourself and in your journal, but with someone else? Could you say, oh, the difference between powered and empowered is this? I know that. That's the difference, right? If that's where you're at, I promise you that's enough. Level two, that could be enough for you today. But if you're like, no, Nina, I want a level three, what's the self realization of it? What's the action? Give me something to do. I want you to take one thing that you could change in your own work environment, in your own relationships, wherever it might be that you actually feel safest when it comes to intimacy and closeness. I want you to take a powered example and either acknowledge it, that this is a powered moment. That's the one thing you can commit to changing this upcoming week. Or I want you to see if you can empower it. If you can say, ah, you know what? This was a moment where I was engaging in a powered way. I was minimizing, I was misrepresenting, I was outright rejecting, I was invalidating and willing to invalidate another human being. But now that I see that, you know what? I don't think that's the way that I want to be. This is how I would empower this. And if you need a line, right? Ah, oh, thank you for bringing that to my attention, whether it's you who brought it to your attention or someone else. And then you follow up with, that is not my intention to engage in a powered way. What do you need? I know that this was a very quick episode and I wanted to get you guys this information about, intimacy at work, about being close with other human beings at work and the reality that we all have power dynamics, lowercase p. We can all transform from powered to empowered dynamics in our systems. And that's a capital P and a capital E, folks. That we can do this on an individual level as well as with our companies and our organizations and our jobs at large. And that if we're playing with the anti supremacist spectrum, we're really recognizing that this isn't a choice, that nobody looked down a line and was like, I would love to be a level five supremacist. Nobody did that. We're human beings having a human experience. And for some of us, supremacy is a greater part of that than others. I want us to really look at this, at our humanity today. And I want to invite you to really explore, are there any parts of you that might be popping up on that supremacy spectrum, whether it's overt, casual, covert, unconscious, or in fact, anti supremacist? And are you continuing to do the work to lean into your edge, find comfort in the discomfort, so you can move through into your next growth space, which I certainly hope as an empowered human myself, is toward greater empowerment. So that's what I planned for you today, folks. Thanks so much for listening in. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about the episode, hit me up on Instagram at Empowered with Nina. And of course, we have a lot of resources in our show notes. I invite you to go read through those show notes, okay? Thank you for being willing to human with me today in whichever way that is. I hope you took at least one thing from this episode that was beneficial for you. Thank you, thank you, thank you again. And I look forward to speaking into your ear real soon, okay? I'll be back with you guys real soon. Bye for now.